Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines. Kashmiris on both sides of the line of control are observing the accession to Pakistan Day with a renewed pledge to continue the struggle for freedom. On this day in 1947, two representatives of the Kashmiris unanimously passed the resolution of Kashmir's accession to Pakistan. In his message on the day, Prime Minister Imran Khan reassured Pakistan's commitment to stand by the Kashmiris in their struggle for freedom. In Afghanistan, two district police chiefs have been killed in separate IED blasts in Zabul and PACT province. In Zabul, Nawbahar district governor says 4 other security personnel were also wounded in the explosion. Police in PACT province say 3 policemen in addition to the chief of Sorobi district were killed in the roadside bombing. Taliban have claimed responsibility for the PACT province killing. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's corruption trial has resumed after a 2-month break. Netanyahu has now become the first serving Israeli Prime Minister to go on trial. He was indicted last year on bribery, fraud and breach of trust. Syria is holding parliamentary elections today after 2 delays because of the COVID-19 pandemic. These are the 3rd parliamentary polls in the war-torn country since the pro-democracy uprising against President Bashar al-Assad in 2011. Official data shows some 2,100 candidates are contesting for the 250-seat parliament in all 15 Syrian governorates. A record increase in the global number of COVID-19 cases has been reported over the past 24 hours. The World Health Organization says almost 260,000 people have tested positive overnight, increasing the total to over 14.2 million, with more than 601,000 deaths. Brazil has reported over 28,000 infections and 971 fatalities overnight, increasing the death toll to nearly 79,000. In Pakistan, 46 people lost their lives in the last 24 hours, raising the total to 5,568 with nearly 263,000 cases. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. "73 years ago today, at a meeting of the All Jammu and Kashmir Muslim Conference in Srinagar, true representatives of the Kashmiris unanimously passed the resolution of Kashmir's accession to Pakistan. The historic resolution called for the accession of the state of Jammu and Kashmir to Pakistan. The decision was a testimony to the fact that the people of Kashmir had linked their future with Pakistan. As 13 million Kashmiris languish under Indian oppression, tyranny and brutality, they are remembering the Kashmir accession day when they decided to join Pakistan instead of India. A decision that was bulldozed by the greed of Hari Singh, who sold off the valley against the will of its people to New Delhi. International rights groups say Indian occupation forces have martyred over 100,000 Kashmiris since 1989, close to 100 this year so far. Pakistan has fought on every forum the case for the right of self-determination of the Kashmiris and the UN-mandated plebiscite in the valley. The occupied Kashmir has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 349 days. Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan is committed to the Kashmiri people and stands with them in their struggle for freedom. Marking the accession day to Pakistan Day, Khan said Kashmir's right to self-determination is recognized by the United Nations Security Council and international law. Khan said Pakistan will continue to fight for justice for Kashmiris as they struggle against the brutal and illegal actions of the Hindutva supremacist India. The Prime Minister said he is confident that justice will prevail in the occupied valley and Kashmiris will be free one day. This comes as Kashmiris on both sides of the line of control are observing the accession to Pakistan Day with a renewed pledge to continue the struggle for freedom. On 19th of July in 1947, representatives of the Kashmiris unanimously passed a resolution of Kashmir's accession to Pakistan. The decision was a testimony to the fact that the people of Kashmir had linked their future with Pakistan. The Indian government has decided to start the construction of a Hindu temple at a disputed religious site in Ayodhya from early August. Officials say Prime Minister Modi will lay the foundation stone of the temple at the site of 16th century Babri Mosque. Last year, India's apex court allowed Hindus to build a temple on the site, which was demolished by Hindu mobs in 1992. This had sparked countrywide riots in which thousands of people lost their lives. In Afghanistan, 2 district police chiefs have been killed in separate IED blasts in Zabul and Paktika province. In Zabul, now Bahar governor says police chief of the district died after his vehicle struck a roadside mine in Share Safa. He said 4 security personnel were also wounded in the explosion. Police in Paktika province say the chief of Sorobi district was killed by a blast while he was on his way to defend a security checkpoint. They said 3 of his guards were also killed in the bombing. The Taliban have claimed responsibility for the Paktika province killing, but no group has claimed responsibility for the Zabul blast so far. Meanwhile, a record high number of the COVID-19 cases has been recorded across the world in the past 24 hours. The World Health Organization says some 260,000 people tested positive in a day. The number of global cases has now crossed 14.2 million with more than 600,000 deaths. In Brazil, 921 deaths were recorded and over 28,000 people infected overnight, with the death toll approaching 78,000. More details in this report.
The COVID-19 pandemic is raging across the world once again, breaking grim records every day and overwhelming healthcare systems. US deaths from the novel coronavirus have exceeded 140,000 as cases continue to rise in 43 out of 50 states. The pandemic is also not letting up in Southern America, where Mexico and Brazil are the worst hit. But Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has ruled out any lockdown measures, saying they have suffocated the country's economy.
Depression kills more than the virus COVID-19, so we have to face the problem, the coronavirus pandemic, keeping the head up. Regrettably, people are going to die. People are going to die.
South Africa now ranks 5th in the world for coronavirus cases as an aggressive outbreak hits the African continent. The country reported more than 13,000 new cases, with a tally above 350,000. In Australia, the opening of Parliament has been delayed by several weeks due to a second wave in most populous states. The new outbreaks in Spain have forced regional officers to announce a ban on gatherings of over 10 people. Elsewhere, thousands of angry protesters came out in Israel against the government's handling of the pandemic.
We are protesting against our government that doesn't do nothing for the citizen. Everything is closed, everything is open. We don't really know what's going on with the corona, with the numbers. People don't know if they have food to eat tomorrow. We want answer, we want food, we want our money back. And it's very sad.
In Asia, China has reported 16 new COVID-19 cases on the mainland, of which 13 were domestically transmitted, while South Korea's new daily virus cases hovered below 40 for the second straight day. The country identified 34 new cases, raising the total caseload to 13,745.
Meanwhile, India has reported its highest single-day spike in COVID-19 cases as nearly 39,000 people tested positive in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry said the total number of infections has reached over 1.07 million. The ministry said 543 more people died overnight, raising the toll to nearly 27,000. It said Maharashtra is the worst affected state, having over 300,000 cases and more than 11,000 fatalities. Officials said for 17 of the last 20 days, the number of people recovering from the disease in Delhi remained higher than newly detected cases. But they said no other state in the country has come close to such a trend. Pakistan has reported 46 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, raising the toll to 5,568. The Health Ministry says 1,579 cases were reported overnight as the tally crossed 263,000. The ministry said over 204,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. It said there are now over 59,000 active cases in the country, among which 1,763 are critically ill. Sindh is the worst hit province with over 112,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 89,000 cases. Now moving on, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's corruption trial has resumed after a 2-month break. Netanyahu has now become the first serving Israeli Prime Minister to go on trial. The Israeli Prime Minister was indicted last year on bribery, fraud and breach of trust. While Israelis have taken to the streets in almost daily demonstrations against him over handling of COVID-19 crisis and corruption allegations, protesters have called on Netanyahu to resign. But according to Israeli law, a prime minister charged with a crime is not required to resign. The trial was delayed by several months due to fights over potential immunity, back-to-back elections and COVID-19. The leader of the right-wing Likud party is Israel's longest-serving prime minister, having been in power continuously since 2009. Syria is holding parliamentary elections today after 2 delays because of the COVID-19 pandemic. These are the third parliamentary polls in the war-torn country since the pro-democracy uprising against President Bashar al-Assad in 2011. The votes will be held in government-held areas as well as some areas in the provinces of Al-Hasaka, Idlib and Al-Raqqa, where Damascus has partial control. Official data shows some 2,100 candidates are contesting for the 250-seat parliament in all 15 Syrian governorates. In the 2016 vote, an alliance led by the ruling Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party bagged 200 out of 250 seats in the unicameral legislature. Now, Azerbaijan says the recent border clashes with Armenia have jeopardized energy exports to world markets from the Caspian Sea route. Vice President of Azeri State Energy Company Sokar Elshad Nasirov said the energy infrastructure is located in the vicinity of the current military operations. Nasirov said 2 oil and 1 gas pipeline and some other facilities are also affected not far from the territory where clashes have taken place. Yesterday, Armenia also warned about security risks to the region coming from Azerbaijan after Baku said it might strike the Metsomo nuclear power plant. 15 servicemen from Azerbaijan and Armenia and 1 Azeri civilian have died in clashes between the two countries since July 12th. Moving on, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has discussed key issues of further bolstering a war deterrent with the country's military. State media says Kim chaired a Central Military Commission meeting and approved major munitions production plan in Dikes. It said meeting stressed the need to thoroughly arm the young commanding officers. This was followed by a closed meeting to examine military situation in the Korean Peninsula and the potential threat. State media has called the measures taken as historic decision. Pyongyang has threatened to give up its willingness to denuclearize after 3 failed summits between Kim and U.S. President Donald Trump. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. France, Germany and Italy have threatened to sanction that continue to violate a United Nations arms embargo on Libya. A joint statement was issued by French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte. The leaders urged the warring parties in Libya and their foreign supporters to immediately end a military escalation in the country. EU leaders have asked the UN for large disengagement of forces and possible demilitarization in the parts of the country. The leaders reaffirmed the need for a special representative of the Secretary General in Libya to be appointed promptly. Now, Egypt has expressed concerns over Turkey's political and military interferences in Arab affairs. In a statement, Foreign Ministry spokesman Ahmed Hafiz slammed Ankara's interventions in Iraq, Syria and Libya. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry said Turkey's military intervention in Libya lacks legitimate basis and violates United Nations Security Council resolutions. Earlier, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said he will take appropriate steps if Egypt and Libya are threatened. On Friday, Erdogan denounced Egypt and UAE for supporting forces of warlord Khalifa Haftar, describing the steps by Cairo as illegal. Greece says it's on the verge of signing an agreement on maritime borders with Egypt. Greek ambassador to Egypt, Nicholas, said that Turkey will not like the exclusive economic zones demarcation agreements between Greece and Egypt. He said it's up to Ankara to maintain good relations with its neighbors. Secretary of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Egyptian Parliament, Tariq Al-Kholi, said the agreement will guarantee the economic rights of Cairo and Athens. He said the demarcation is part of the international community's response to Turkey's practices that have broken international law. Last year, Ankara signed a maritime accord with Tripoli, seeking to create an exclusive economic zone at Turkey's southern Mediterranean shore. Now, in France, hundreds of protesters marched near Paris to denounce police violence and honor Adama Traoré. Traoré was a black Frenchman who died during a police operation in 2016. Donning face masks, demonstrators marched in the city of Bournemouth-sur-Oise, holding colourful banners. The march came on the eve of the 4th anniversary of Traoré's death in the city. He was celebrating his 24th birthday on July 19, 2016, when 3 police officers used their weight to restrain him. The outrage generated by African-American George Floyd's death in the United States in May, whilst in police custody, has resonated in France. EU leaders have extended their summit by an extra day amid a lockdown on over $2 trillion budget and a massive COVID-19 recovery fund. A spokesperson for European Council President Charles Michel says the summit will reconvene today. The recovery deal is being blocked by northern European countries who favour aid to be given in the form of payable loans rather than free grants. Hopes for an agreement grew on Saturday when Michel proposed revisions to the overall package. Under his new plan, the share of free grants in the proposed €750 billion recovery fund was cut to €450 billion from €500 billion. But Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte said he still sees a big difference between EU member states. Now, Russia has told Azerbaijan it's carrying out snap combat readiness drills amid border tensions between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Russian Deputy Defense Minister Alexander Fomin says these were carried out in the spirit of goodwill. Russia considers Armenia its strategic partner, but Fomin denied any claims that these drills are linked to tensions on the Azeri-Armenian border. The Defense Ministry says the drills involve about 15,000 service members and 400 aircraft. They also include 26,000 weapons and military hardware and over 100 vessels. Russia's ambassador to the United Kingdom, Andrei Kelin, has rejected London's allegations that Moscow's intelligence services tried to steal COVID-19 vaccine research. Talking to media, he also rejected suggestions that Russia had interfered in United Kingdom politics. This comes days before a report into allegations of Russian interference into UK democracy is due to be published by the Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee. The UK, US and Canada's security services had alleged Russia of targeting vaccine developers. Earlier this week, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said Russians almost certainly sought to interfere in the 2019 UK elections through illicitly acquiring documents. Now, in Panama, 7 people have been murdered in an attack by unknown assailants near the capital, Panama City. The chief prosecutor says bodies of 4 women and 3 men were found near a lake about 80 kilometers north of the capital. The prosecutor said the Gatun Lake victims were of ages between 17 and 22. He said some people who managed to escape the attack are assisting authorities with the investigation. Authorities said some of the victims had gunshot wounds, but the motive for the attack remains unclear. Victims' family members had reported them missing on Friday after they had gone out for a swim. In Turkey, the death toll from a migrant boat disaster in Lake Van has risen to 54 after 3 weeks of search operation. In a statement, Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu said the boat was carrying at least 60 migrants. He said 9 bodies were recovered from the lake on Saturday. Migrants regularly cross into Turkey to reach Europe as Lake Van is located near the border with Iran. 7 people died and 64 were rescued when a boat carrying migrants from South Asia sank in December. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has put forward a new global deal to battle growing inequality across the world. The plan aims to create a new model of global governance under ethical frameworks to ensure that power, wealth and opportunities are shared more fairly. For the Nelson Mandela Foundation via internet, Guterres said people have suffered enough because of inequality and racism. He added, colonialism and patriarchy are the reasons why people are denied their fundamental human rights. He highlighted that inequality starts at the top in global institutions, and these should be reformed to meet the needs of this world. Guterres highlighted the world needs a new social contract which would allow young people to live in dignity. He labeled the pandemic a generational opportunity to build more equal, sustainable world. A Syrian artist finds solace in making mosaics of prison memories to not forget Bashar al-Assad's regime tortures in Aleppo's Aziz district. More about this in this report.
Mosaic artist Abdul Razak Tawal remained in prison for 6 years in Damascus. He has started reflecting the torture memories with mosaic stones. Tawal has everything in his mind, like the moments of interrogation, friends, and torture.
I saved everything in my mind, like moments of interrogation, friends and torture. Now I paint everything I remember. I also picture prisoners who died under torture.
Only a small number of victims dare to share their experiences after being released. Tawal got his freedom from prison in June 2019. He says he paints everything he remembers, even the pictures of those prisoners who died due to torture.
I made a portrait of the cruel that tortured me so much that I couldn't have a child and caused my 2 friends dead. I can't take out of my mind the picture of him wearing glasses on his face and having a cigar in his mouth, as well as I can't forget his torture.
According to rights organizations, hundreds of thousands are currently held in the prisons and interrogation centers of Assad regime.
In Chile, the lockdown to limit the spread of the coronavirus pandemic has caused surge in unemployment and inflation. The economic pause has reduced many people to poverty. Meanwhile, the protests over social injustices and inequality have also raised the situation. More in this report.
The coronavirus outbreak has deepened a growing economic crisis in Chile. At the foot of the Andes Mountains lies Camp Dignity. It is a land government has provided to those people who are living just above the line of poverty. People are forced to reside in these camps because they cannot afford to pay rent elsewhere. The residents of these camps are infuriated as they do not have facilities in these camps.
I call on the authorities because there are a lot of people here and the authorities are nowhere to be seen. So in that sense, we need support and to be heard. There are a lot of needs here that are not being met. There are lots of babies here. We need formula, diapers, ingredients for casseroles because at the moment we are going hungry and we have needs.
The capital city Santiago is the inhabitant of some 6 million people. They largely depend on the informal economy. The unemployment rate hit 11.2% between March and May. The skyrocketing unemployment has worsened the conditions of the locals.
The economic and employment recovery will be slow. Chile is based on a service economy. These services have been largely suspended, and therefore there is a substantial loss of the total number of jobs in the economy. And therefore, the source of income for a large number of people, which we cannot yet quantify, but which we estimate will be of a great magnitude.
According to the national statistics of Chile, people working in the commerce, accommodation, food services, and construction sectors are the worst affected. The pandemic has claimed more than 6,000 lives in the country, with more than 288,000 infection cases so far.
The International Monetary Fund says it's exploring additional tools to finance the poorest countries and others hit hard by the pandemic. It called on the group of 20 economies to extend debt suspension initiatives to help poorer countries cope with the economic fallout. Addressing the meeting of G20 finance ministers, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said the global economy faces a deep recession, while World Bank President David Malpass said the situation in developing countries is increasingly desperate. He urged G20 countries to extend a freeze in official debt payments by the poorest countries through the end of 2021. Following the meeting, G20 finance officials vowed to continue using all available policy tools to bolster the global economy. Earlier, G20 agreed on an action plan to provide over $14 billion in relief to the poorest nations. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Indus News. Take care.